Do you want this close?
Oh, yeah, we can just put that on the back.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You ready now?
Yeah.
Call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the board of directors of the Bolinas Community Public Utility District. All directors are present. Today is June 18, 2025. I'm going to begin by reconvening this meeting into an open session following a closed session. I'm going to report that no action was taken during the closed session. Is there a vote to disclose the matters discussed in closed session? No, no motion having been made, we will not disclose the matters in closed session. I'm then going to adjourn that portion and go on to the regular agenda. Okay, this is an opportunity, I'm going to call community expression, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters which are not on the agenda and for which no action can be taken. But we would be willing to entertain a brief discussion on any matters that you want to bring to the board's attention. Is there any community expression items from members of the audience or the people on Zoom? None appearing. I'll then move on to the next item, which is to consider amending the order of items in the agenda. Is there any items that you recommend we switch on the agenda?
No, but just, you know, obviously to point out that we implemented the change that you guys recommended from last time. So all of our permitting and people ideally that are here, will be at the top of the agenda.
Okay. So then I'm going to move on to action items on the agenda. Number one is public hearings. This is a public hearing on the draft fiscal year 25-26 budget. It's an opportunity for members of the public to discuss whether or have any questions, I guess, about
And to protest, rate increases, which you guys essentially approved the draft. You'll be looking to approve the budget later in this meeting. We did not receive any letters of protest. Bell checked the mail this morning and there still was no protesters.
okay.
So yeah, and it doesn't appear that anyone's here. Well, I mean, you could ask on Zoom. If there's-
Okay, does anyone have any objections or protests to the proposed budget? Hearing none, move on. Operational resolutions and approvals. Contracted work related resolutions, item 2 on the agenda, recommendation from the BEP, which is Bolinas Eucalyptus Project / Bike Path Ad Hoc Committee. Are we passing that item tonight?
Yeah, we did not receive the proposal from the arborist in time, so we'll have to strike and defer that item to a later date.
Okay. Moving on to item 3, resolution number 738. Which declares an emergency exists, authorizes groundwater monitoring well installation. And destruction for the Bolinas Community Public Utility District wastewater treatment plant.
Yep, so I'll just introduce this. We don't have to read the resolution in detail. But basically what this declares is an emergency effectively as part of our as part of our new tech order, which is effectively the board, the regulatory board that oversees our treatment facility and over at, the sewer ponds. Part of that was augmentation of our monitoring of groundwater. And what they had us do was prepare a groundwater monitoring work plan, which was essentially how are we gonna augment our monitoring. As part of that work, West Yost was the engineers that were consulting engineers on that project that helped us prepare that work plan. They in consultation with Rob Gailey assessed our existing monitoring wells, and both of them are defunct and need to be plugged and basically destroyed. And then additionally, we need to put 3 new monitoring wells into like strategically positioned there. And that's part of the full work plan. That work plan, the proposal to do that work will come to you guys in July. But this essentially declares the resolution that allows us to effectively ask Westios to subcontract to actually have that work done. The nature of the emergency is that basically right now we're collecting garbage data from those wells, even though regulatorily we have to collect the data. But because those the seals and everything are broken on both of those wells, basically they're not a true reflection of groundwater. They basically are collecting surface water. And that obviously can be contaminated from, just animals and whatever. And so there's an urgency around, improving our actual monitoring plan as soon as possible. But additionally, when you have those kind of wells where the seals are broken, they actually act as a conduit to contaminate groundwater. So there's real urgency to, essentially get our monitoring program up and running, install the 3 new wells and destroy the other 2 existing wells.
All right. Is any question, members of the board, about resolution 738? And if there's none, can I get a motion to approve it?
I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion?
Is there an idea of the cost associated with it?
Yeah, it's gonna be $100,000 around for us to install that, and that was budgeted for.
Just wanted to see if it jumps. And does this satisfy all the tech order, or are there more?
Oh, no, there's big portions of the tech order. This is the very.
More to come.
Mhm.
All right, any other discussion on resolution 738? If none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0.
Okay, thank you.
Item 4, district issue permit approvals. Limited water use permit application for the property at 105 Terrace Avenue, Lowell Strauss. Thank you.
That's me.
It's my guess. Okay, and so you applied for a limited water use permit?
I was told to apply for it.
Right.
That's something that I was told that I had to do.
That's right, you do. Yeah, because you have a permit with the county for work, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's how it works. You have to come to us for it. So it has to do with work that's being done on the property, which potentially would increase the amount of water that is used.
Right.
In which case you'd be given a limit, which is either based on the average household usage or the historical use, depending on how it works out for you. You understand how that works?
Right.
Okay. Is there anybody on the board have any questions about the property or the application? And if not, do I have a recommendation then on whether this is a candidate for a limited water use permit?
I don't feel this is a candidate for an LWA personally.
You do not?
I don't. Yeah.
Okay,
Seems like the footprint isn't changing, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms is not changing. I don't see how we have the authority to apply an LWA, even though I may like to, but I don't see it, but I could be convinced by someone else.
okay. Well, let's go around the table and see how people feel. Grace, what's your
Did you receive no diets?
Yeah, we got, yeah,
Okay.
thank you,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was just looking at here. Yeah, it seems to me that, the likelihood is that it's gonna be. Water use would be reduced rather than increase, and the footprints, there's nothing being added to it that. There's no added bedrooms, there are no added bathrooms, is that correct? It's just the house just got moved,
Exactly.
which was kind of an amazing engineering feat, I've got to say.
Yeah, we've all watched it happen.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
I'm
All right.
curious on the irrigation that she references in her letter, that is coming from where that water supply is coming as a secondary water supply from from the septic system, is that my understanding? Correct?
mhm.
I honestly, no diet, is the expert, I don't know anything about it, but he did say that. That there's a decrease in usage because it uses recycled water or something like that.
Okay,
So it's, there's, county would not allow us to make any changes to the house whatsoever.
yeah, because it referenced, not using potable water, which we know Peacock is, and we know we're not huge fans of irrigation systems because they tend to leak. But if you've got a water source coming that's recycled, it's not potable, I still would recommend you might put some irrigation leak system on there, so you don't fill the tap the water supply from this septic system, although I don't really know how that operation would be, but, I guess I will. Leave with Grace if. You say, or sorry.
So you would,
You.
your recommendation would be to not put a limit on it and have it unconditional.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time on that one.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. Go ahead, Andrew, what's what you.
Yeah, well, I've been following this project. I actually went to your hearing and because I was, as an architect, I was interested in like. How is the county and the coastal commission gonna approve it? And the senior planner, Emmanuel Barakat said. He stressed it so many times that it's an existing house. And if it wasn't an existing house, then the permit would have never been approved. And really like if you look at the code and the decision is all based on like an existing. Fixture count, existing footprint, and that's why it was able to get moved. And so I think based on that, I really agree with Kevin that it doesn't really merit an OWO. In this instance, it's just moving a house to save it.
With an upgraded septic system.
Yeah, with an upgraded septic
Just
system.
bonus.
Are we either bringing the sewer down to our houses for?
We're working on.
Maybe throw in another $100,000.
Why, to the next meeting, we'll try.
We were forced to put in a new septic system, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
we understand.
that was kind of like the main condition of the.
Yeah, and we talked before and just to let you know, that's, I'm still working with getting a response for the regulators as to whether they would approve, expansion of our system. I know I told you as soon as I find out, I'll let you know. But unfortunately, it's still in a situation where I don't know whether they will approve that.
Well, and just to be honest about the time frame, we've been working on trying to add people in. And what our capacity could be for multiple years now. I mean, it's quite out of our hands at this point. We need to get answers back from a lot of different other agencies and people, so.
Yeah.
But the spirit is willing, the permit is weak, I should say.
At this point, like.
Yeah, well, at least you'll have a great septic system.
Well, the old one, we never had a problem with that.
Can I ask a question? When you like declared it an emergency, what was happening on the site that you were like, we need to do this?
The house was completely cracked, the foundation.
The foundation was cracked.
Cracked in half and 3 feet apart.
3 feet. Okay. Cool.
It doesn't get any more of an emergency. Yeah, the landslide was directly under the house.
Well, yeah, glad it didn't go to the beach.
Well,
Yeah.
came pretty close.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, it sounds like the board is of a consensus and there should be an unlimited, it should not be a limited water use permit. Because there's no expansion of potential water use, so it'd be considered an unlimited water use application. So can I get a motion to that effect?
I move that the status continues. So, I mean, do we need a motion for that, or?
Well, he's applied, and so we have to.
So I would say that we do not.
So we deny the
Yeah,
application for an LWAP.
Yes, we're denying her application for
But
an
you're
LWAP.
lucky.
Which doesn't mean use unlimited water.
I probably consider it a lucky thing.
Well, in this particular vote.
Yes, your little moment.
I'll tell you in 5 or 10 years if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Okay, so Grace has made the motion then that this should not be a limited water use permit. This has meaning that you can continue to use it, but we have a moratorium on new water meters because we have a real tight water situation, so we just make you mindful of that.
Yeah.
Is there
This was my neighbor, so.
you
No,
know,
water.
is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion?
Or do we just let the county know that no action is needed, because is the
No,
county
we're gonna-
waiting for us?
No, we're gonna take action, we're gonna
Yeah,
grant
this
his permit without any limitation on his water use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unlimited
I just, as a side comment, I mean, I would also ask, depending on what your proposed use is, you obviously know, being in Bolinas, that. Water is, we're covered in the water use, but if you're gonna use it for rentals, short term or long term. We would just encourage that you put any kind of measures to, for leaks, for irrigation, or, and just advise your renters to be really conscious of their water use.
Yeah, it's
Good
something,
community member.
something we've been doing for years, quite frankly.
You have, oh, okay. I don't know, but thank
Right.
you. Thanks. I just wanted to say that for the record.
We tell everybody.
Yeah,
Right.
we, yeah, so I would second,
And
oh, no.
it's been moved in second, and I was just waiting for a discussion to end, and then I'll take a vote. I'll call a question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go. All right.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet all of you.
Yes.
Good night.
I'll move on to item 5. This is a draft 2024 Consumer Confidence Report, which is the annual report on water quality. We've been provided with a copy of the 2024 Consumer Confidence Report that staff has prepared.
Yeah.
Do
And
you
this,
need a vote on this?
yeah, we would like your approval of the draft.
Okay.
Um,
Anybody want-
And I'll just provide a little bit of context here. This looks very much like last year's. We discovered some interesting facts through this process, which was essentially we do a pretty exhaustive testing in December, which we colloquially refer to as our Title 22s. And that happened, but it happened in September and it was very pared down. And it wasn't exactly clear why this happened. It was kind of all of us a little bit not, the first year without Jennifer really at the helm leading this effort. And so what we discovered was that actually the exhaustive list that we look at because I freaked out, to be totally candid, and contacted our regulator and I was like, oh no, we forgot to do our Title 22s and we're preparing our consumer confidence report and we don't have all of those results. And they were like, what are you talking about? You're fully up to date on all of your sampling, and were like also confused by me using the term Title 22 and stuff like that. So anyways, it was really a good learning experience, and it was like sort of a warning without any major consequences. However, I just wanted to be totally transparent that you'll see some of these results say, hey, this result is from 2023. And that's effectively compliant with what you see in a lot of the things that we were testing on a yearly basis. From a regulatory standpoint, we only need to test on a 9-year basis. So one of the things that really brought to the fore was like, should we even be doing this? Because we spend about $2,000 a year doing that exhaustive testing. And I think Jennifer was basically, I had obviously a discussion with her about it when all of this happened. And she was actually under the impression also that it was required. She had been handed off this sort of protocol from her predecessor. And so I think what Belle and I are thinking, and Stu, and like the whole experience made us kind of think about, well, maybe what we do is pay a consultant to help us think about if we want to go above and beyond our regulatory testing and bring things up either on a yearly or every 2 years or whatever, go beyond what, at minimum, the regulators are saying we have to do. What do we want to do? What do we want to put on that list? So as an example, like, that we did the PFAS testing, that's something that's like out there in the ether and, concerning to the community at large. That's not on our Title 22. There's a bunch of stuff, and I don't, to be totally honest, don't know how that stuff got on there, why it's on there, if it's a good idea for us to be testing that annually. I don't feel like that's where I would, turn to a hydrologist that has some sense of, the kind of impacts on the environment and on human physiology or whatever, and determine like, what do we want this to look like? How much money do we want to spend on this? Because basically, when we looked at what we actually had to test, which we did do that testing for the subset of Title 22 constituents that needed to be tested this last year. Like I said, we did that in September, but that only cost us like $200. Okay, so we're basically spending 10 times what we needed to spend on this testing. Again, we didn't do it this year, so you'll see essentially the asterisk that says, you know, all of these things were tested in 2023 instead of 2024. But it does bring up a question of what should we be testing? Anyway, so I just wanted to point that out to you guys and also to the public at large. And I think what I would suggest is this will just come back at a later time point. For us to kind of figure out how we want to do, you know, before the end of 2025, right? Because we obviously have to sample these things in the reporting year. So for instance, the consumer confidence report for 2024 is either, you know, looking at things that were tested in 2024, or as I just explained, before 2024, where you can like re-report the things, as long as it's within the statutory limit of that reporting, you know, for that particular constituent. So before the end of 2025, we'll basically come forward with a recommendation for either like a proposal to work with a consultant to kind of figure out what we want here. Maybe also sort of like how much money do we want to spend on this? Do we want to say, hey, let's spend $1,000 a year on this, like have the amount of money we're spending and basically test, you know, the 5 top things that we want to test or whatever. Anyway, so that's,
How much would a consultant?
I don't know how much it would cost, but I mean, we would get that information from a proposal.
Well, you're a scientist, do you like the idea of testing every year for the data and monitoring our source?
I think that 9 years sounded crazy to me. So I was like, what if we get a constituent hit at, you know, year 9, then we're basically like, oh my God, we could have been, you know, it's not very reassuring to
You
the
could have like
public.
6 fingers by then.
Yeah.
I think we.
And I just think we've set a precedent, that's why I wanted to bring this up, because it's like we've set a precedent in our community. Whoever happens to be paying attention to this, obviously it's not everybody, but those that have been paying attention to it, you know, we've set a precedent that we test, you know, maybe the chemical that they're most concerned about every year. And so I think that's why, you know, it needs to come to a public meeting and we need to think about like what is on that list. But again, like I could imagine from a community standpoint, it's like, I want PFAS on there. I want to know that, you know, and I don't even know how much that costs yet or anything, but I just think it's, you know, it's kind of given us an opportunity to think more deeply about what we test on an annual basis.
All right. Well, I think the board would probably defer to you and your recommendation as whether any particular tests are seen to be appropriate in a given year.
Yeah.
Depending on, you know, weather and natural, you know, circumstances and whatever, all the things that could happen.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like you're not voting on that now, obviously
No.
you guys are just approving this draft. I just wanted to highlight what is essentially different from last year.
Right.
I would say, well, we can talk about it later, but it would be nice to see what other districts send out to their
Mhm.
constituents and if it's this detailed, because to me, it's a very impressive document. I don't remember reading this in any other place I've lived. So
Yeah,
maybe
it's,
we are going above and beyond, but it's also kind of nice to do more than is required.
yeah, and to be clear, like a lot of places do a lot of stuff. So one of the other things that I think that we should think about is revamping this so that it's more kind of user friendly. Like a lot of what people do is send out a more colorful pamphlet that is like basically you know, and then directs people like, if you want to see all of the results, here they are on the website. So that's something, you know, with a lot of stuff, I'm like, let's wait for next year to do that. But it's something that, you know, Belle and I have thought about and are wanting to implement. And I think that that's kind of more of a whole kind of exhaustive overhaul of what are we testing? How are we reporting this? You know, what does the consumer confidence report look like going forward?
I think the PFAS stuff, that was an EPA mandate, right? It's a bunch of small.
No, it hasn't been mandated yet, and what happened was we were basically chosen as a guinea pig, and so
Yeah,
they
sorry.
did that, sorry. Yeah, so.
That was like a one-time thing, it's not
Mhm.
Right.
something that requires to do. every-
Yeah, and we didn't have any hits, so,
That's good.
but it is because this often happens where essentially the EPA is thinking about doing something, they'll do these kind of pilot studies, we were, effectively chosen for that pilot. But it's often because they're considering introducing that as a mandatory constituent. So, they may come to us in a year and say you need to start testing for PFAS. Which again, one of the points that Jennifer made was that while we may not have to test for all of those things, there has been situations in the past where we had already been testing something that was not mandatory. And that was nice because essentially we could provide negative hits to our regulators and they would say, okay, actually, you don't have to test for this now because there's, evidence that that's not an issue in your source.
Yeah.
One other point to point out is that when we bring the wells online, that brings a whole other, testing regimen around that groundwater and what that looks like is not clear and it's gonna add further expense. So I'd say there's also an opportunity to think about like, okay, could we lessen the amount of annual testing that we're doing for our Title 22s and really be able to kind of balance the budget more effectively when we already have this augmented cost around, sampling that's gonna be required for the wells.
Okay.
All right, can I get a motion then to approve the draft consumer confidence report for 2024?
I send
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in
I have
favor?
a discussion real quick.
Yeah.
I would just suggest moving the Spanish paragraph. Este informe contiene información a little higher up because it's sort of halfway down the page, and if
Okay.
the Spanish speaker receives this, they may not read halfway down the page to find the sort of Spanish
Yeah.
instructions, I guess, Spanish language instructions, so.
Yeah, and I didn't make
Okay.
this clear, and this isn't statutory, but this is the template that is provided for small water districts.
Okay.
Such as ours, so we basically followed
Okay,
that, but
and that's
I.
where they have it, they,
They have it there, but I
Okay.
mean, it might be bigger, we're also kind of like mindful that we have to like actually mail this thing out.
yeah,
So, it may have been like larger on the template, so we can just, I think it's fine to just move it at the very top. If
Yeah.
nobody else objects.
Very good.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I have a question. Do we test the water at the Arroyo as well? Is that information?
Yeah, according to some of the.
I think some of the tests are the raw water, or is it?
But
clean
we
up
don't
water?
test them, it's raw water, but it's coming into the plant, we have unless we collect it from the creek itself, are you saying?
We do some tests at the Roy Hondo and also the West Tank and Wood Rat, so.
Yeah, but the testing port is at the plant right before it comes
Oh, I
into the
see.
plant,
Yeah.
but it's still raw water, but it's gone through the,
But that's not this test, this is treated water, right?
No, both are, you see, like, sorry, it's confusing, but we have, like Belle was just saying, we have Oreo. We have Wood Rat 1 and we have the West Tank.
Mm.
And then in addition, we also have like copper and lead, which is at the home. So it's super,
Those are tested at a few different homes, right? Is that what it is?
10 homes that have to be the same as.
Oh, I see, there's a different table, there's a different result.
Mm-hmm,
Table 4 and table 5 are different.
yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, so again, this is where I'm like, this is not to me, this is basically continuing with what the template is.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's not very visually enticing or user friendly or very,
it's very
comprehensive.
scientific, it's very scientific.
Yeah. I am a scientist and I do not favor this.
So
I
are
mean,
you
and-
proposing that you could give us a different template?
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility, and like I said, when we do a deeper dive on this, I can bring forward examples of other, just like, they have really pretty shiny, like, what do you call those? Flyers, I'd say they're more in the style of a flyer as opposed to like.
But we have to get this out by July 1st.
Yeah, so this is basically like, we
next
don't have the
year.
opportunity to do that,
Oh, to
overhaul it now. And so I would say like, we're kind of suggesting your edits are, kept at a minimum. And more like around formatting or whatever you guys want, but we plan to look more deeply at our consumer confidence report in this next.
I would support that.
Yeah.
To encourage that we revamp it for future. I mean, having gotten this letter for years, just even before, I do look at it and I look through it, but I also, it gives me a level of confidence that the water is being tested in its
Mhm.
capacity and that somebody on their staff, somebody's has signed off on it. so.
Yeah, and just to point out, like, it's pretty kind of amazing because you have a lot of discretion on what you're testing, what you're reporting. I mean, obviously, some things are, mandated. But also interestingly, I think what really confuses me is that when you get, if you have like a hit, you have to report it. But if you don't, then you don't have to report it. But what that ends up looking like is like you can make your water quality look really crappy, right? Because we were testing for all kinds of things that we didn't even report in this. And so there's this tendency to just like, oh, we're not gonna report any of the negatives, but we'll report the positives. Really, I'm like, we're doing this for the public, like reporting that, at least even doing things like, we tested 100 compounds or constituents. 99% of them are blah, blah, blah. The one that was outside of, rain, like just highlighting some of
Yeah.
these. And then pointing somebody to all of the tests we do and all of the negative results is just like, whether somebody's obviously gonna be super interested in that, because there's nothing there to look at per se, it still gives somebody peace of mind.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, anyway, so, and that's the thing is like, we have a statutory obligation to mail this thing out. Obviously, if you include all of that stuff, the thing becomes unwieldy. So it's more like, what can we prepare that basically directs them to a more exhaustive list that's on our website?
Yeah, but you could put a summary somewhere,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, did we already get a motion to approve this in second?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Gone to item 6. Okay, this is under budgetary / financial resolutions and approvals. And 6 is audit engagement letter from O'Connor and Company. We've been provided with a engagement letter draft. You need us to approve this.
Yeah, this is pretty rote at this point. I think this is, we have to change auditors every some years. I think maybe next year it's.
Next year, but it could be if within their firm, they have like 2 or 3 people who are being the auditors or what, I'm not sure exactly, but there's possibility of staying with the same firm and using a different principal auditor, yeah.
Yeah.
But we have to look into that next year.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the audit engagement letter with O'Connor and Company?
I so move.
I would say.
Is there a second?
Yep.
All right, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Moving on to item 7. Resolution 739. Director's choices for determining fiscal 25-26 appropriations limit. This is a
Yeah.
requirement under state law.
Yeah. And this is just the resolution that says, this is last meeting, you approved the notice. That was gonna say how we were gonna do it and what it actually was. This is the resolution that essentially, says that I picked the methodology. So, that's, if you guys can approve that.
Can I get a motion then to approve resolution 739? Somebody,
I so move.
thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
That moves us on to item 8.
Yeah, and this is sort of the sister resolution that says, okay, now that I've adopted that methodology, here is the actual calculation. Again, there's actually more details in the notice, and sorry, I should have brought that forward again. And then Kevin, I know Kevin is very uncomfortable with this because he doesn't feel like he fully understands it, which is totally understandable because it's very opaque. But what we do here is this is basically establishing our limit for the 25-26 year.
Mhm.
We essentially get numbers from the state and the county that factored into the notice, like it was spelled out in the notice, how we use those numbers to essentially augment our previous appropriations limit. It's basically, multiply this whatever it was, $280,000 last year, multiply it by essentially a factor that looks at whether our population increased and basically a CPI. And then those things factor into, okay, now it's augmented by this much this year. Okay, we actually are just stating what it is for this year, when, as part of the auditing process, when we look at, oh, what did we spend in the 2025 year? Like when we perform the audit for like we just performed the audit
Last year?
for last year,
Last
right?
fiscal year,
Yeah, but this year, going into this year, we'll be performing the audit for the present year, right? And around February, that's when we start preparing these materials to look at this established rate and whether we went over it, okay? And that was obviously not this number, it would be the number that you were in for that year. So for the appropriations limit for the year 24-25, what was the limit? Now that we know how much we spent in that year, did we go over it? If you go over it 2 years in a row, essentially you were collecting money and then not spending it. And so you're not allowed, you essentially have to return that money to the state. What I would suggest, I know that I keep saying this to you, Kevin, but it's gonna be more concrete when we actually have those numbers to look at as part of the auditing process. And so what I will like give a deeper dive into actually like what are the numbers we're looking at here? What are the things that actually go towards our costs that, you know, factor in like things like debt and everything like that, and capital improvement projects that basically say, hey, this is how much money we spent in this fiscal year that we're like essentially you know, countering the limit. And so I hope you can sit tight for a longer period, but basically I think it makes more sense to have that in the context of actually real numbers. What's that, Andrew?
Well, Stinson Beach, don't they usually vote
Yeah,
to approve
yeah,
using saving more than they have appropriated?
yeah,
We could
because
do
they
that,
have the
right?
yeah, well, we are not usually over our limit, so it's,
Yeah.
so it hasn't really come into play. As our tax base increases, Jennifer was concerned that we would be at a point where we would be over our limit. I don't think we were over last year, and I don't think we're gonna be over this year because we had a huge, you know, we had the tank site replacement project, so like if you have big capital improvement projects that occurred within that fiscal year, you're very like unlikely to be over your limit. What they do is basically, they essentially pass or bring it to the voters. Hey, we collected tax revenue from you. Sometimes it may be over the appropriations limit. If we do that 2 years in a row, we would otherwise have to give it back to the state. Are you guys comfortable with us basically going over that limit and keeping that money? And basically, you have to do that, even if you employ that strategy, you need to renew that thing every 4 years. And that's something that they have done, but it's only relevant if you're actually over your appropriations limit, right?
Right.
If you're not over it, it doesn't like, oh, now I get to have more money. This is basically the tax base, it's not our service rates. So there's, you know, it's not, I know, because you were asking last time, hey, can we do this and could we augment the amount of tax money we're bringing in? That's not the case. Basically, the tax that we have the same percent tax as Stinson, it's just that their actual base is larger. And so, yeah, it's not a means to basically collect more money, it's a means to keep that money if we do collect it. But unfortunately, we are not in the same position as Stinson where that becomes super relevant. Obviously, they use it as a means to essentially augment their reserves,
Yeah.
and we're not in that position.
Any other? Is there questions? I think we're gonna need a motion and a second on resolution 740. So, but it sets the appropriations limit at $307,060.69. So can I get a motion to approve resolution 740?
Is it 740 or 742? I'm sorry.
We're on 740, item 8 on the
Oh, I
agenda.
see, sorry, yeah. I so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Move on to item 9.
Okay, so this is our Q3 financials. You guys essentially look them over and, approve them, but it's kind of a formality, I would say. There's no opportunity for you guys to not approve these.
Second.
This is what happened.
That's an opportunity for questions from
Yes.
anybody on the board.
But I still would like you to approve them just as a, matter of.
Sure, okay, so this is for the third quarter of 24-25. And are there any questions about the third quarter report? And if not, can I get a motion to approve it?
Oh, yeah, and just to provide some context, Belle and I are trying to have quarterly meetings with our bookkeepers. We had our meeting, I don't know, was that a week ago? And basically went over these, this information. Much of it already surfaced at the level of the board in terms of our Q1 and Q2, because some of the big things that changed, like our insurance went way up, that had already surfaced because we pay it in Q1. And yeah, not much changed. And then I think a lot of the kind of things that are a little bit messier actually get resolved. So I'd say this Q3 is kind of the least interesting of the quarters, because basically things will clean up by the end
Yeah.
of Q4, and you already saw some of this surface in Q1 and Q2.
Okay, so you need a motion to approve it, or just for information only?
I would say please, yeah, have a motion to approve.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the third quarter financials?
I said.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item 10. Okay, this is resolution 741. This is approval of the district budget for 25-26. Copy of which is attached to the resolution. I think we've already shown it to the public, as I recall.
Yeah, nothing has changed here from that draft and the Prop 218 notice that basically reflected this budget.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve resolution 741? Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in
think
favor?
I have
Oh, go
a
ahead.
comment, I think.
Mhm.
Sorry, this is item 10, 741, fiscal year district budget. It's just a typo, I
Okay.
think. Expenditures is with an I, not an A. Page 1 of the budget.
Oh, for the actual budget.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
in
that
the-
probably happens everywhere.
It's in the budget, page 1.
Yeah, I'll go through, there's a bunch of those that just, everything needs to be changed.
And then I guess I have another comment about the budget in general, which could wait till the next budget cycle, but maybe mention it here anyway. Since we're talking about it, BPUD has these sort of peripheral miscellaneous projects that we work on that aren't really accounted for in our budget. And I'm just wondering if there should be another column for miscellaneous,
You mean
You know,
outside of water and?
outside of water, sewer, septic, resource recovery,
Yeah,
like
so
the-
this is something that we've talked a lot about. It's actually not trivial to do
Yeah.
this.
Okay,
Because of the way QuickBooks works.
okay,
That is what we would call an enterprise. We are looking into getting on QuickBooks Online, and at which point I will play around with exactly what you're describing, because I would also like that world to exist.
Okay.
But it's also technically challenging, because, I mean, for one thing, I would say, we don't have an extra tax revenue source to be like, hey, community, pay for, X. What we do in that case is where it's, a broad benefit to the community, we basically charge our water customers.
Mhm.
So, it's not, in as much as that thing can be, line itemed, it would come out of, or be, it would go against water revenue
Yeah.
as an expenditure there.
yeah,
So,
okay.
but it's something, I think, yeah, anyways, and we've essentially used our tax revenue as basically, like we've talked about Stinson, like, obviously they have the opportunity to do that in like very heavily, but they basically subsidize their water rates with that tax revenue. To some degree, we do that as well, but you could imagine, you could say, hey, the money that's going, you could try to like separate those things and say the revenue that's coming in from, we're gonna support water fully from water rates and service charges and all of that.
Yeah.
And the other money is gonna go towards like community benefit. Obviously, that would make your water rates really high, right? Because essentially it's really expensive to provide water to in rural districts where we don't have a ton of customers, right? And so, I'm not saying that we should do that, but it's one of the ways that I was thinking about kind of trying to tease these
Yeah.
things apart as you're highlighting.
Okay,
Any other discussion or questions on resolution 741, our district budget? If not, can I get a motion to approve it?
We did.
Or do we already move it?
Yeah, Michelle, we did.
Yeah, we did.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I think I'll just do 11 and then I'm gonna skip to 13, 14 and 15 if that works for you, since
Yep.
folks are here. Okay, so let's finish this. Item 11 is resolution 742, which is sort of a companion resolution, increasing our rates.
Mhm.
And now that we've approved the budget, we have to approve increasing the rates to balance the budget. So is there any questions or comments about the new rate? And if not, can I get a motion to approve resolution 742?
I have a question.
Sure.
All right, on the resolution itself, I think I'm confused by the table here. I think it's different than what we looked at previously. It's just sort of structured differently,
Yeah,
right? And which is fine, but
you mean because of what appeared in the Prop 218?
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's, I mean, I didn't change anything
Right.
there, that's basically the way we've always
That's fine.
done
I
it.
mean, I like the new layout. It's simpler. As far as conveying information, but
Okay.
I don't think it's correct to say the column on the right says dollars per cubic foot, which I don't think is actually correct. I think it's dollars per 100 cubic feet.
Okay,
I think that's
yep,
but
So.
Yes.
are you proposing that we amend the format of resolution 742 to
No.
state that? Or?
no, I think the format's fine, but I was confused by that column. I think it's incorrect. I think
yeah,
it
it's
should be-
confusing too, right, because it's like the 100 to 1500.
Well, that's why in the prop, was it 218 notice, we
The
had
Prop
the
218
range.
is like crazy
Yeah.
in terms of what it requires you to do,
Okay.
and like I was telling Val, it was like insane, after doing all of that, we never even said what the rates were.
Right, that's why I was
And-
looking to compare this to that, but
You know,
It's-
cause it's all about like, what are you augmenting it by, and it's like, and honestly, if I had done this, I would have been like, oh my god, I don't want to have us charge $1.88 per cubic foot, like, or per 100 cubic feet, because that's just like annoying for us to actually calculate.
is it?
Well, Bell says it was.
I mean, hopefully it's something, hopefully it's just something in a spreadsheet that
Well-
calculates it for you, right? Or-
It's just because we do 100 cubic feet and we round it, so that we don't really have change in our billing. In terms of like 36 cents.
But now we do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess now we do.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
so anyways, it's just something that, yeah, now I'm more aware of how this whole thing goes, and I'd say as part of the. Budget process going forward, I would almost design these first, like retro engineer from not, cause what happened, right, is like, I was like, oh, we just need to increase everything by 25%. But some of those numbers were annoying once they had that 25% applied.
Yeah,
And so, I'd be probably looking to round some of these out next year.
okay.
And yeah, reverse engineer and see what the impact is on the budget from that.
I have a quick question. What's septage?
Yeah, so this is another thing where I was like, maybe we should change this going forward, but right now I don't have time to do that. I just have to keep on what we're doing. So, there is weird stuff in here. Which is basically also in terms of. So when you looked at the septage dumping charges, as you're saying, septage is a weird word that
I didn't know that was the
No.
word, but now I do.
okay, but I think it's like
Okay.
basically the contents of your septic system. And we, as we've discussed, don't even do this anymore,
Yeah.
so it feels really irrelevant to have it in here.
But
I
maybe,
mean, I guess this. It gives us the authority to do it
Yeah.
should we
Yeah.
want to, or find that we have to. So maybe it's prudent to keep it in here. But I feel like it's a little confusing as a member of the public to basically look at this and say, oh, I wanna dump my septage. And then come to us and say, oh, no, you're not allowed to dump your septage.
yeah,
So it's weird.
Okay, just check,
Yeah.
as long as I. yeah.
well, should we amend this resolution now before we approve it to say,
No,
to
let's
say that?
don't do that because I don't know. I would wanna talk about.
I mean, not necessarily remove it, we can keep it on here, maybe at some point in the future, we'd like to accept septage again. But we could add something that says, you know, as of this date, we are currently not accepting septage dumping. Is that something we would wanna
I
entertain?
would say maybe we qualify it and give us more flexibility, but we reserve the right not to.
Mm.
You know, collect it or something like, I don't know, just so like, cause I mean, I feel like we don't, and then if we're keeping it in here just because in case we do.
Right,
Do we wanna make that qualifier less like stringent?
what do you guys think?
It's a rate that we establish, it's just so we don't provide the service, so it has to pay it.
There's so many things in here that we.
Get money too, yeah.
What other fees can we put in there that we don't accept?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is how much we charge, so maybe that now.
But I feel like we should really venture out here and like have haircuts.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on resolution 742?
Well, I had a question about Exhibit A, which we've talked about a little bit in our Canyon
Yes,
committee. And I still don't, I mean, there was some talk of, is this even legal, like the way this is structured?
yeah, I mean, basically, I'm continuing
Okay.
on with the status quo, but there was some question as to whether this prorated, this is basically tells you. Hey, if you connect to our system in 1975, you'll pay this much to connect to our system based on the improvements and the that other customers have already essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah, put
Paid
toward
for
it,
it,
the
yeah.
system, paid for the, yeah, in the system. So then it goes out to 2050, at which point you'd have to pay 10,000.
no, more than that,
Okay, what is it?
20.
way more than that.
With 5%, oh, total collection, so you'd have to pay 129,000
Yeah.
for a joiner system.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's what we have on the books. Similar to our septage, I don't think we ever actually have to implement this thing because we hardly ever have new connection fees. However,
There's going to be.
yes, there is as we've discussed on the Canyon Road Ad Hoc Committee, this is likely to become more relevant.
Yeah.
And we should amend
Mhm.
this. But Bell and I basically have discovered instances where rates were increased mid-year and you basically have to submit a new Prop 218 and stuff like that. But basically what I would say is we just like, for now,
Mhm.
I need to consult with a council
Okay,
to figure out how we would actually make this like legally sound. Obviously, districts do these connection fees. I think it was something about how the interest was calculated on it that was not like up to snuff.
okay,
So anyway, for now, let's just.
thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on resolution 742? And can I get a motion to approve it?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. So I'm gonna use my prerogative here to advance items 13, 14, and 15 above item 12. So I'm gonna call item 13 next. And that's to approve the resignation from the chief operator. And we have been provided with a document, which is a resignation. From Stu Wilkender to resign his position effective July 6th as a shift operator, actually he's chief operator.
Somebody's in the. I move that we accept his resignation with regret.
Yes, or second.
Oh, yeah, it should say chief.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there a
I'll get him to initialize that if it matters, but I doubt it does, but I'll
Okay.
make that correction.
So Grace, you just moved to
I
accept
have
that.
to accept.
Is there a second?
Seconded. Yes.
All in favor? Aye. Then I'm gonna call item 14 on the agenda, appointment of a new interim chief operator. Who coincidentally has just walked in the door. Not coincident.
He always.
I come to all of I would like to object to Stu.
So we, as you know, had a closed session to discuss this and, you got a phone call from Georgia, and you want to say anything about the item before we,
Yeah, I mean, Andrew and I met this morning and it was pretty clear, I think, based on your guys's. Our discussion in closed session and basically, I think we're in line with Andrew, or I know we're in line with Andrew. And just to, clear that basically, we have two letters that we drafted. I'll make sure that those are, because like some of the numbers kind of shifted, and so I'll modify those letters. We have basically a choose your own adventure right now. We have two letters. We're hoping that one letter gets thrown in the trash and the other one gets implemented. And basically, yeah, that's, I think I'll post, or I don't know what I do exactly, but basically maybe, I don't want to share the letters because they have misinformation in them right now. But once that letter, is, appropriately amended, then I guess, I'm not even sure if it would normally get posted on our, as part of the materials, like when we can look into it and just make sure we're doing it like, the appropriate way. But that's basically it, and just really appreciative of Andrew as a incredibly dedicated employee, who has really stepped up and saved us from what could be essentially a nightmare of incompliance, I would say. So yeah, Andrew, just really appreciate everything you do on the daily for us.
anything you'd like to say, Andrew?
Right now I'm dedicated on Friday.
Yes.
Yes.
Support.
And we got our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you feel comfortable with the terms that were discussed with you with Georgia and you're ready
Yeah.
to accept?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to be here.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, yeah. All right, then can I get a motion under item 14 of the agenda to appoint Andrew Spalding as the new interim chief operator?
Yeah, I would make that motion and say thank you and I'm glad you're in our community.
Yeah, is there a second?
Second.
The second, okay, and any other comments, just to say what we're very happy to have you do this job and look forward to your services to the district. You're doing great, so,
Thank you very much.
yeah, all right, I'll call the question, all in favor?
And you'll call
Aye.
it doing it.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
All right, well, thank you very much, and you've got the appointment, and I'll finalize the terms with you and onward.
Yes, and just to relay to the public, this is an effective date of July 1.
Right. Effective date of the new appointment, right? All right. Cool, thank you for coming.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
Get back to our college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
I see you guys.
Yeah. Okay, I'll call item, now I'm gonna go back to item 12, resolution 743. And this amends resolution 681, establishing a special category of septic system limited water use permits for issuance in connection with the Galena Septic System pilot program. And
You.
Georgie, do you wanna
Yeah, right.
summarize what the
Again, that-
amendment is?
Yeah, you guys looked at this extensively at a previous meeting. What had happened, just to provide some context here, this was when we were approached by BCLT to essentially get all of this in order and actually initiate these LWUPs on folks that were part of the septic pilot program. We recognized, we looked back at that resolution and we're like, oh yeah, we're supposed to get all of these people on an LWAP. But as I started to look at that in more detail and collect information from both BCLT and the county around how that program is effectively managed, there was erroneous information in the resolution which this one replaces, which is 681 being replaced by this one, 743. So all I did was basically collect, Belle and I collected all of this information from the county and had conversations with BCLT, and we incorporated that information into this resolution. We got that information very late from the county last time, which is why I had made major changes to our resolution based on their input or the amendment to the resolution. And I didn't have time to basically get their okay, final sign off on what you're putting in here is consistent with our stuff. Now I've basically gotten that from them. And so this is, incorporates their modification, most recent minor modifications. And basically it's the same thing that you guys looked at last time. And so now it has a number and is ready to be adopted.
Okay,
And just to highlight, I'd say the major substantive change from that original resolution, the original resolution said that BCLT would be monitoring water usage at these homes, which is not what they were doing and not what we want them to do.
Yeah.
So.
We check the meters anyway, so we can
Yes.
stay on top of it. So does this mean we need to have a special meeting to bring all of these properties into
No,
LWUPs?
okay, so that is another complexity here. Basically, what Belle and I would suggest is you guys just direct us. These are very rote. You're in the pilot program, so you're gonna get this LWUP. If you, just as we saw today, these are just actually augmentations of their septic systems, right? That was the whole point of this pilot septic program. In case people are not aware, I don't know if anyone's here, but basically, right, this is a program that BCLT developed to essentially help people augment their septic systems that would enable those septic systems to treat more waste, and that ultimately would enable them to build an ADU. And so essentially what the program does is kind of converge those two things. From our standpoint though, really all that's happened, if you think about it, these homeowners are doing this in two phases. They're augmenting their septic systems, and this was through low interest loans that BCLT had secured and all of that. They're doing that, and then they're building an ADU. So what Belle and I are recommending in terms of just not making this super conflicting with our existing stuff, because as you saw today, changing your septic system alone doesn't have any implications on your water use. And so this is why this is a special, as opposed to just a regular LWUP, where obviously that wouldn't trigger an LWUP. Here is this special LWUP that we're instituting. Okay, so it means that it's a real LWUP. If you look at it, it's the same LWUP that we would, traditionally, issue. What we are suggesting is that these people, when they actually build their ADU, they would come back to us and they would get a regular LWUP.
Okay.
And that's what happened last month, is one of these people, essentially that process happened before we got all of our ducks in a row. So they didn't have this special LWUP in place, because we didn't, hadn't issued it. And they came forward with their ADU plans, and you guys instituted an LWUP on that, with obviously the idea that another structure on the property would affect water use. So so that's what I would say is, though, this is very kind of rote. Just give us effectively the authority to not make these people come forward. They will come forward to you in the normal course when they ultimately build their ADU.
Okay.
okay.
I thought some of them might be legalizing existing structure, like the one last month was sort of like an artist studio that they were converting into a proper ADU, but there may be some, I don't know, illegal ADUs that are
Already in.
taking
this
advantage of, yeah, like, I don't know, I don't know the details of any of these.
I don't think
It's not
so. I
much
think
that,
that
okay.
they're all people that went through, you know,
They just
went
wanna
through.
build ADUs.
Yes, it's
Okay.
not like, and people weren't just like, oh, you wanna be a part of this program, you're part of the program. There was a selection of people that were, you know, in compliance with the program. Because, you know, and again, this was BCLT's program, but it was closely developed with the county. And so anyways,
I don't know, I was part of that program and then they just completely dropped off the radar. They had plans for my site and everything and I never heard anything again.
yeah, I
It
just,
just
I
evaporated, so I'm surprised that it still has
Okay.
legs, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what happened is that they started to realize it was a lot more difficult for them to administer the program and stuff, and so there was like a few, this is my understanding, that there were originally more applicants, and now there's only like 9 people in the program or something like that. And so it was just essentially, they like had originally bit off more than they could chew. And then essentially it got pared down, and I don't think, you know, that's the other thing that's confusing about it. It's like a pilot, it's like written as though it's like, oh, and then once we go through this, we'll, you know, expand it. But I think they've already discovered that they don't really have the money or, bandwidth to expand it.
It doesn't really make sense. Honestly, it makes sense for the VPUD to run this program, I think. Like, it's right in our wheelhouse, septage.
Uh-huh.
And I know, like, I'm in the program, but I know a lot of other people in town who want to join it, who it would really help because they have challenged septic, and you probably still want to join, I'm guessing.
I do, mine works great, but the idea of, you know, being
Yeah.
able to get permitted and get it up.
Yeah.
You know, they were originally hoping that the county would really work with the folks that were in this program. So if you had, you know, say a existing ADU that wasn't permitted or something, that they were hoping that they could get more affordable housing here, which is why
Yeah.
LCLT was doing it in the first place. Yeah, my sense was that the grant funding that they were hoping to get didn't really materialize so easily as they were thinking it might, and the county people changed in the planning department too, and seemed like that was a big piece of the problem. I guess my question is, help me remember, people who are on the board. There was a lot of discussion when this first came because people weren't sure about moving lines across roads. I mean, this was a big issue.
Yeah.
And thus, I think the initial LWAP for the septic, even though theoretically nobody's using more water, that was part of what made people kind of feel better about this, that people weren't sort of sneaking in under the radar somehow, that if you were going to do this, you were going to get an LWAP.
Yeah.
And okay, just also, I
Mhm.
think that, and I wasn't there obviously at the time, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but in my conversations with the county, I think that some of that was really coming from the county, because basically they were permitting septic upgrades that otherwise would not have supported
Yeah.
the number of bedrooms that you had. So they were essentially making exceptions for the kind of the grade of septic system they were allowing that would allow you to add a new bedroom effectively.
Yes, correct.
And so, but as a contingency to be like, we're making this exception for you, you guys already monitor water carefully in your community. That water ultimately goes into that septic system. So if you guys ensure that you put an LWAP on these systems, then we'll support these systems as. Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah, so that's where, and I think what happens is basically, there's some politics around, we don't wanna have all of this stuff that we're managing. BCLT says, well, you know, there's some resistance from our staff, I think, around, we don't wanna have to monitor water, and how often do we have to monitor water, and is this just compliant, you know, is this just our existing LWAP, but just people that are on there for a different reason? Or are you guys demanding more rigorous testing? I think originally the county was saying, we want more testing than your normal quarterly meter reads, which is again why we were like, well, then BCLT needs to take this on, which BCLT ultimately agreed to. But then, and then we defined our resolution based on that. But then in conversations with the county became more supportive and said, fine, just have BPUD do their normal LWAP. So when you look at their resolutions associated with this program, the county's resolutions, they just refer to these people being on LWAPs in our system. And so that's where I was like, well, let's just like scratch this other resolution, update it, and have it actually reflect what it is. And I made sure, like, what we're gonna do is our normal LWAP system, which we have this whole thing in place to get people in that are out of compliance back into compliance before we like threaten to shut off water and blah, blah, blah. And, the county said they were fine with us doing that. So anyway,
I think they also maybe changed it from adding a bedroom to make it only add an ADU bedroom. Because originally, I think the program was just, you can add a bedroom to your property. But then they really honed in on ADU for the housing portion of it, which I think is good.
yeah,
So do we know how many people this applies to?
I think it's, how many did?
I wanna say 12.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
No. All right, so that's our discussion of resolution 743.
Yeah,
Any
so,
other-
and just to clarify, these people will not come before the board to institute their LWAPs. You guys have effectively, granted us authority, and we will just call them in at a time that's convenient for them in the office and institute the LWAP there.
Okay. So can I get a motion in to approve resolution 743, which provides the amendments that have just been discussed?
I said,
You make the motion?
I do.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 0. Move on to item 15. Approval of the BPUD staff MOU. You've been provided with a copy of the new MOU with the changes highlighted.
Yeah, and, so if I can just say a few things.
Highlight the highlights.
Yeah. Couple of things here. Obviously, the personnel committee has already seen this MOU. It's only some of the numbers have basically changed from the budgetary process. This was one of the things we did from, if you remember the previous MOUs, we reformatted the whole thing. And basically, one of the things I was appreciating from this is like, from my standpoint, this is really similar to like a union contract that you have at the school, which ultimately is serving a dual purpose. It's like, obviously your contractual agreements with these employees. But in addition, it's like serving as a transparency document to the public around what you're paying these employees. And so I felt like our original one was really like, okay, this is what the staff has agreed to. But it wasn't actually daylighting some of the things that we've agreed to and in terms of like the overall costs of these things. So some of the things that you'll see I highlighted as I just added this like little bullet point that tells you, oh, this is how much this thing is gonna, cost in total to the district. So you'll see that is just a theme that's highlighted over and over again. And then just a few other, just to bring you to some modifications that are more substantive. The work attire has changed somewhat. It was a few things were added in there. They were asking for a baseball cap.
What page are you on?
Sorry, I'm on page 6.
Page 6.
And then also I feel like it's important for employees that work outside to have UV protection, so I added that in there. Okay, also, this is, I'd say, very important, professional development associated with compensation, that whole section. What we were doing was incentivizing people through pay increases associated with certifications. That were beyond what we actually need to run our system in compliance. And I don't think that that's a good idea. We also had weird things in place that made it very difficult for us to essentially get people that were in compliance on our wastewater system. So it was basically, they were in like this maddening like circle where they would basically not accrue enough hours, and then essentially their hours would lapse as an, you know, as as like an in training personnel. And so basically, some of this is like, why aren't we incentivizing and creating a system that actually gets people in compliance with, you know, and encourages all of our employees to have, as we see employees leave, it's very nice to have somebody else in the wings that can fill that position and that you can continue to run the system in, or the, you know, district in compliance. So, yeah, I was, yeah, that reflects that. So basically, it says we still encourage you to get this certification. It's discretionary at that point when you're going beyond, which is basically a grade 3 in both the wastewater or water. It's discretionary as to whether we will pay for that stuff, but you know, all of your education associated with that. And additionally, there's no pay increases associated with that. As I've said, you know, I'd like to think about other ways to, I mean, especially at the low end, our employees are not paid very well, to the point where I think it's like, you know, somewhat unethical. And I think we need to think about ways to augment that and potentially think about replacement of this certification. I'd say we're anomalous in having the certification really be the primary driver of how you increase your wages in the district. So that was really, I think, the kind of the most meaningful change that happened in this MOU. I think that the overall, the employees are supportive of that change, but it's contingent on us replacing it with something, right? We can't just be like, oh, and now you've maxed out earlier and there's nothing to fill that void.
Can I ask a quick question about this? Beyond grade 2 or level 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, what sort of skills are they learning, and would they be applicable to our
No,
system?
they're really not. I
Really
think
not?
it's like the type of treatment that you're doing is different. And so, you
So
know.
really, it's not like a lot of that would.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't wanna say that it's not useful, but in some ways, you're even training somebody to leave, right,
Yeah.
at that point, right? It's just like, it's a little weird. And importantly, what I really I objected to is that we were increasing certification on the water, which tends to be easier to get, and effectively at the expense of the wastewater. And like, that doesn't make sense. We need to make sure there's like effectively parity here. We need to be in compliance on both systems. So, yeah. Also, let's see, there was clarity on skipping grades. Employees, you know, an employee was requesting that, so I just made clear that that's something we could decide discretionarily, but not something we favor. There's value in going through those steps
Okay.
from an educational standpoint, is the way I feel about it. We augmented, I'll just highlight the pay increases at the end here, so I'll skip over some of that. New responsibilities in the upcoming fiscal year and potential associated compensation. Basically, there's 3 effective kind of positions that we highlight here that did not exist in previous MOUs. And essentially, we had $1 an hour pay increase associated with that effective like field of expertise that the shift operator is developing. Let's see, the MOU states that we'll be giving all employees a 3.5% increase. That's loosely based on a CPI COLA, although it's greater than what the COLA was achieved last year. And some of that we did analyses like the personnel committee, and maybe even the budgetary committee. I'm not sure where this, I think it surfaced at the level of the budgetary committee too. But basically there was not, historically, there's not been a very tight correlation between the CPI and what we give as, you know, pay increase. Obviously, you expect a lag there by a year because you're always looking at the previous year, but beyond that, it wasn't just like it was trailing by a year. So that's something that I think, you know, going forward, maybe we clean that up, but for now, that's basically what is, I'd say what the 3.5 is consistent with what we've done in previous years. Let's see. I just want to point out, okay, so one of the things to point out here is because as we just received the resignation letter of Stu Okander, he's not on this MOU. And that's something we, talked to him directly about and he was comfortable with, because there's only 5 days of him basically. It's not worth doing all of that just to have him there for 5 days, so he'll just continue. With his fiscal year 24-25. Then we have this, I will, after we figure out which of these happens for, you'll see there's 2 kind of options. The numbers here are not reflective of what he was offered or has been, accepted.
Sorry,
And
where are you looking? right now?
sorry, I'm looking at Spalding because, sorry, if you go to
At
the.
the top,
One of the things that we surface in, so number 10, this is like subheading 10.
Yeah.
We then essentially say, well, actually, this is something that I modified. I basically looked at all of the things that were just like pay increases associated with that, and I just like summarized them here. Because ultimately, those things, if you look at somebody's previous pay the year before versus their pay this year, those things factor into it. So that's the first thing I did. And then this is traditionally what we've done. We basically list the rate of each individual, the hourly rate of each individual employee. So the confusion here and what will get amended, this gets, we need to essentially have folks sign this before July 1. What I would say is we wait until Andrew has signed his letter to modify this accordingly. Right now, it confusingly lists him twice and says this or that.
Yeah.
And so we'll just clear up whatever that says at that time. And then importantly, now we have an open position, which is listed at the previous rate, which is $24 an hour. And let's see, that's basically it.
Where's the $24 now?
Very bottom.
where it says should operator open,
I think I have an older version of this.
Oh,
Was there,
yeah.
is there a newer version that was uploaded? Because I don't have the open position. I don't have the,
Yeah, sorry.
no,
Yeah, basically what
Is that
happens
was a
is
drive?
this was driven in part by discussions with Andrew and all
Yeah.
of that, so that got
problem.
clarified, but
Where is
I'll
it?
just-
Oh,
Yeah, he's listed
SharePoint? Okay.
on it and to sign it on the one that I have.
okay.
Older, I see, maybe.
Does it matter that, or maybe
Version
it's
two.
my version, but like under every section, there's a projected costs? Does that number matter, or is that just like a ballpark?
It's just a ballpark
We only
because
have three
basically,
employees now.
yes,
Three
and then
spots.
it's basically projected with that open position filled.
Got it.
And even beyond that, it was really developed during the budgetary process, which ultimately
Thanks.
is modified by this, but it's very confusing. It's like, I don't want to. I think in retrospect, we do this MOU process way too early. I mean, it's fine to start it, but basically we would have folks signing it normally in February. I wasn't comfortable with that, and I told you guys, the reason is basically if we don't adopt the budget, then we would have to scramble back to the MOU, right? So imagine we have protests here that say, you guys are paying your employees too much and you need to, whatever, and we had a huge uproar. Then essentially we've adopted this MOU to pass at the first of the year, but we don't even have the budget to back that up, which is why instead what you guys did was approve the budget tonight. And then this is coming forward off the heels of that. And so, obviously it takes time to negotiate all this, and I'm not saying that that should happen in like, a compressed fashion at the end. But basically, I would have done this differently, where I would essentially have prepared all of those numbers when I understand what the rates are for everybody, and, it's a little confusing because you would see that this is a more accurate portrayal of what we think our budget numbers would be than in the draft budget, right? Because the draft budget gets solidified, months ago.
I used to have this problem all the time at the personnel committee too, because it's the cart and the horse. You negotiate your raises with the employees before the budget committee has figured out how much you know? Or conversely, do you have to wait then until the budget committee is done with its work? And then sometimes race to
Yeah.
get a negotiation done before July the 1st or something, because you've waited
Mhm.
until the budget has been approved in May or something, so.
Yeah,
It's always been, a problem of which one you.
Yeah.
First.
yeah, and I would suggest what we did was fine this year, like I'm okay with it, I just would have done it in a more efficient manner.
Yeah,
Cause basically I was also feeling this and I'm like, this is really weird. I have this personnel committee. I mean, it happens that person sits on both the personnel committee and the budget committee, which is very helpful.
yeah.
But effectively what I had said was, I want to get an okay from the personnel committee of what they are bringing forward. But then I called a closed session with the budgetary committee and said, this is what the personnel committee is recommending.
Yeah.
Are you guys comfortable with
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Because then ultimately, once I got the go ahead from the budgetary committee, then we went and, essentially told the personnel committee, it's an iterative process, but I think in the end, it makes more sense because you're bringing forward something that can actually be supported by the budget.
Yeah.
The problem is, obviously, we can do all of that, and then the public itself could come in and say, we don't support this
True,
budget, right?
true, yeah.
So that's where I think, you can kind of get all your ducks in a row and be like, this is what we're gonna bring forward. The budget and the MOU are in line with each other and, supported by both the personnel committee and the budget committee. But let's not sign that thing until we know that the budget is actually approved and not being protested by a majority of the public. So I think it's a moot point, because obviously you see that nobody's here, but I think it also just makes sense to set it up in a way that is sensible.
Anybody object to the budget?
No.
Okay.
I can't recall. I can't recall anybody ever coming to a meeting and objecting to our budget. You're spending
Yeah.
too much on this and too much on that.
No, we only have gotten a letter from a community member, in terms of raising rates, not.
Yeah, one letter saying, yeah, you're charging too much or something. Yeah, it's pretty much the public accepts whatever our
Yeah.
budget is.
Yeah.
Let's put some real crazy in there next year and see if anybody notices.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, anyways, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to highlight. So what I was hoping you guys could do is provisionally approve this with the understanding that I will correct that portion of it that says exactly what Andrew Spalding's rate will be.
Will be,
Yes.
okay.
Question about the terms of this, or the length of this agreement. At the bottom there, page 9, it says this is good for 1 year and it'll automatically be extended for another year. Does that generally happen? Does this,
No, I was wondering about that. I mean, I adopted that from the previous one, but I'm like, do we ever do this? Like, it's kind of
does it
weird.
always get revisited pretty much every year?
I think it does.
Yeah.
And I think this is basically the contingency. If we failed to sign anything, then the old one is still in place.
Right, it does to make sure that there's always one in effect, because there is a conditional language unless an employee or officer of the vehicle requests revision, which
Okay.
is always what happens.
Oh, okay, and then one other thing to point out in terms of what's different from last year. Jennifer has not been listed as agreed to by the following employees. So I put my name there. If there's a good lawyerly reason to not have me listed there, then I'll remove myself, but I think it's very weird. Because all of this applies to me. I'm listed as, she always listed herself and her pay rate. So I don't understand,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm attesting to it as the secretary, but that's just like to agree to your votes, right? Like that I attest to those votes.
Mm.
I don't understand why she would not include herself as an employee who's agreeing to this. And furthermore, if it was because she's like an exempt employee or something like that, I wonder, we now have both Elle and I that are exempt. So if there is some rationale for removing us, then yeah, I would just wonder what that's about. But I think it's weird because effectively, then what am I agreeing to every year?
Well, you're considered to be management, okay, and Bill is too, so management's not considered to be the same as the employee of the district. The employees are more under a contract to get a compensation for hours that, and technically you're not being paid by the hour that you're clocking, you're being paid a salary to perform the job with as many hours as it takes to perform,
Mhm.
and you're not clocking your hours. So that's why there's always been a distinction between management and employees.
Okay.
Well, but their hourly rate is listed here.
Yeah, I guess that's a little weird though, and like, and then all of the totals include, you know what I mean, like, I feel like.
Yeah.
My preference is to basically, we don't have contracts that sit outside of this thing either, right?
Oh.
And so. It's
You're
weird,
right.
yeah, no, and I mean, like, I effectively. I think of it in terms of the correlate of what happens at the school, which effectively is like, okay, this is the union contract and we're management outside of that union. But there's still negotiating contracts with the
Yeah.
superintendent and, you know, the office staff and the principal.
I think
So
so.
it's like, unless you're replacing that with something, I think it's very weird to essentially have management here not renew something.
Yeah. I think there's probably just for expediency, it's just have one document. But I think you're right, technically, management should have its own contract with the board separate from this,
Okay,
but never has done it.
yeah.
Years, I don't know.
So I mean, what I'd also suggest you do is like, I can confer with Jennifer and accounts, you know, council to figure out whether it makes sense for Belle and I to even be listed here. Either only I get removed or both Belle and I get removed. And then do we have a whole separate contract? I mean, I don't know. That's why my preference is to just include us on here.
That's why we've always done it that way, it's just.
Well, so Jennifer was not on here though.
Yeah,
As a site-
probably shouldn't have a contract at all, as far as I can tell.
Her hours were written in there, but she never signed, you know, so it was just that she was.
Yeah, and I don't think that she reported hours, so she wasn't paid that way, whether she stayed to 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I mean, she wasn't.
Yeah, and both Belle and I are exempt employees.
But we're not salary, we're hourly, which is weird. You know, I mean, in terms of we actually we're exempt, so we work when we work and, you know,
Yeah.
but we aren't, I don't know if there's a technical
Well,
difference.
yeah, look into it, just
Yeah.
decide, I don't think that the board has any problem with having separate management contracts.
And is that true for Annie as well?
No, she's
No,
a
she would be,
non-exempt employee.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see if you prefer it or.
I mean, it says that we're exempt employees, right?
It does,
So it's like, I just, it seems
Yeah.
weird to me, is like either we are in this contract or we're
or
not.
not,
But it was like this kind of halfway thing where she's still listed, it says she's exempt. And yet she's not signing it,
Yeah.
but when you look at like, yeah, the benefit, there's most of everything applies to. All of us.
Yeah.
Where it's pertinent, obviously like the certifications and stuff like that. Don't apply to people that aren't, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, you know, I just recommend that when you guys approve it with. Our kind of like discretionary flexibility to either remove Belle and I from the contract. Or keep us in there as signatories and also amend Andrew's pay.
Andrews, okay, so can I get a motion to approve the MOU subject to those modifications?
I so move, and I would also. So you wanna take off Stu Okander's name at the bottom as well, since he's.
Yeah, he's removed from the one that you don't have.
Well, this is the new one, this is V two, I think.
Oh, so on page 10, he's still showing,
Last page.
so delete him. As a listed,
Oh.
he won't be
Weird.
signing it.
Yeah,
did. Mhm.
do we need
Too
to
many versions.
make a line for the new hire that we don't know who it is yet, or?
No, we
Is that-
traditionally not put that in because you put their name,
Yeah,
so, I mean, unless their name is open hire,
you never know.
be very efficient.
Okay,
Oh,
so yeah, I would move to make that motion with those
modification,
modifications. yeah.
okay, is there a second?
One second.
Thank you, all in favor?
I,
Aye, all right.
See, thanks, guys.
I'm gonna need to leave at 8. I've gotta get up.
You got it, okay.
How much time?
I almost need to start half hour and that's why I'm like.
Stretch, seems like a good-
We just have it on
Stretch.
Yeah. stretch.
5 minutes break.
We just,
Get up.
most of this should go fast, we basically have my managers update with me.
So is that, is this
report.
the new
Where you
format?
go?
You're gonna do the manager's report at the end?
Going to
I mean, it's,
something-
you know, it's kind of a test case,
You better know.
so maybe what
No,
we'll
I
do
know
is
that.
next.
I do know.
I have several friends from that.
I mean, after the fact, you guys can just email me and say whether you didn't like this or not, you know, what the best way to deal with it is, cause it's not like agendized on here. But I think it's more a logistical issue, and like, it's not a big deal to me if we just decide.
I don't know, I'm in 2 months. It's a little bit like what I said when this gentleman came last time, it's like. You know, part of our community, people should, I think. If they're here, it's an opportunity for them to be aware of how much you're doing.
Mhm.
I think so. There's something to be said for sitting through the manager report. For somebody who came for something else, even though I understand that it's.
Yeah, I mean, well, now I think practically they're great. Easily informative.
I like the idea of like, if there's a lot of. Heavy items on the agenda, we can just be like, I'm gonna email you the manager report, you don't need to talk about it this late. Whereas if you start and then you get into like 3 hours of. Discussion, you can't really.
Yeah, I mean, that is something I thought about, was like, I don't even need to email, I don't think it's appropriate for me to email it to you. In terms of like Brown Act and stuff like that,
We could put it on the website.
but because I don't think you put stuff on that you don't discuss, like that just seems weird. But I think what I could do is say, you know, I can compile the manager's report into a single report next time if we have like a super heavy duty one, right? And I'm just like. You know, cause often it's just like the time spent talking about it, it's not like really that much more time to say, you know, and this happened.
Well, versus the time assembling it.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just actually trying to get it to you.
I was gonna ask you, in the manager's report, if is there any
Yes.
info about those seemingly permanent beaches contaminated signs? They would have serious signs.
Yeah, we prepared the letter and sent it to them, we never heard anything back.
I'm sure there's no issue.
I can,
Rattle the page one more time. It's so many.
okay, I will.
It's like they're not being rattled.
Mhm. Sorry, I'm just trying to actually join the
Sorry,
meeting.
sorry to distract you while you're computing.
Alright, on resume,
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to actually join the meeting so that I can share my materials,
If you go to a BPED website, you can click on that.
Sorry.
They're really
Name of their-
coffee.
Cafe or?
I don't know they have it.
In the South Bay.
Yeah. I don't know if she makes these for their cafe or if she just makes them for their friends.
Well, either way, I wanna go. support
I know.
their cafe.
but what?
The report.
That's. I think we should just use our issue to also post on website or something, so I can just give summaries.
Will you get me one too, Paul?
Okay.
What's that?
Can I have one too?
Yes.
From the other.
No, I'm not, I'm going to the Midwest tomorrow.
Oh. Work or family. Or.
Both,
Oh.
family and friends.
Thank you. That is fine.
But I actually shortened it to like 5 days, because I have this huge deadline, that I'm in the middle of it.
You have to share the screen.
I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
Like,
just bringing up my.
Sure, working me?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know,
that's too bad.
I mean, does Bell have to allow you to share the screen, or is that your?
I don't think so.
Are you going?
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
going up with Joe in Virginia tomorrow morning.
Oh, yeah. I went to Piston,
Oh.
and I went to the largest water system, the second
Yeah.
largest water cistern in the world. You guys been there?
Yeah.
I think we should do.
Hey,
that.
Belle, I can send my.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yes.
You went to,
Direct, in Istanbul.
isn't it incredible?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I've been there for a music performance.
Will you hide the screen?
I never even heard of it until I got there and people said, oh, you got.
Yeah, just minimize that.
There's one.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
yeah,
let's-
I've got some pieces too.
Kelly, was it you doing, or did I ship people tours of the facility?
Wish the music had been Simpson.
Like
Sewer
they-
fund.
Oh,
No concert
I've got-
That would be nice.
These are the ones you.
Okay, this is
Okay, so
on your.
Public meeting to order, managers, update. Item 16.
Yes, as we've seen trends lately, the monthly consumption and production is going up. We are now at May, 163 gallons today, a day. And, per connection, that was up from April's 128. And you've also seen this trend for over the last 3 years. If we look back in May, we're increasing, consumption, and it went up by 22%. I would say there were not a lot of leaks, so this is really looking at consumption, real consumption at people's homes, I would say. Although there were quite a few leaks at people's homes, so take it with a grain of salt. This is basically our total potable supply and potable demand, as I've talked to you guys about before. This is just looking at, the actual meter reads, and just like we saw from those total numbers where like how much water are we sending to town, we also see at the meter level, people are consuming more water.
Could it also be for gardens, people be using more water and.
Yeah, I mean,
The garden.
That's what it is. Yeah.
yes, yeah, I mean, we know that a lot of it is for, what do you call that?
Irrigation.
Irrigation purposes. So, yes, this is what, I'm not gonna play the video just in the interest of time, but basically this is what things look like in April. Oh, this is what things look like today. I'll play this for you. This is the upper. So, yeah, things are definitely looking like they're slowing down, but, hard to tell there, but it's still spilling. And it's still filled with rocks, importantly, so we're still on the lower. And then this was really nice, basically, Andrew was reporting today that when they looked and basically looked at what was water flowing like at the creek when they were maximally pulling from it, which is obviously kind of important. And it was still spilling, which basically says we're in a good position. Okay, this is the reservoirs as of today. Thank you, Evan. These,
Go back.
oh, yep,
Is there a Zola there?
yeah, just a tiny little patch, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Okay, just showing you what they more from like the standpoint of how full they are. We've had only minor leaks since I last reported to you, which is great. We had a couple this week, which is what you're seeing here is Stu looking for the leak on the booster line. And we identified that leak and they'll be repairing it tomorrow. And then this is effectively, it's hard to tell, but this is, you can see the remnants of the leak against this wall where, the moisture is on the concrete here, but this is actually their repair. This is a weird line that's basically used to flush the system, and also potentially add a 5th filter if we so chose. This was basically showing you that we got the aerator repaired on 1B. So anyways, not to belabor the details, but this was basically Reiner fixed this electrical issue. Which was, we love Reiner. This is basically a summary of what's going on with the Zola. I reported this to you guys last time. What you haven't seen or what you just saw in a couple of slides ago was that they came out and removed the bulk of the Azola. What I would say is that if you look, we had 3 effective removals this year in total. The sum total of that cost, wow, 19,322, forget that other 0 there, that's not even a number. And then it was probably, though, I would say, if you look at the one that happened at July 2024, we're almost in July. So where it's looking more like we're, at 2 a year, which is really, budgeting for about $13,000 in any 12-month period for removal.
Are there certain requirements for money that you have to have in order to be eligible to be hired to remove?
No, no, I don't think so.
I
There's no,
think it's a very arduous task and having certain equipment makes a big difference. Our staff tried all these different ways to remove the Azola and it just. didn't
yeah,
work.
so they have like a conveyor belt. We should film them sometime doing it. But basically, they like feed it onto a conveyor belt that then puts it up into a truck. So, yeah, it's
And then they
basically an
hop on it.
equipment issue. No, and then they just
No.
throw it there.
Yeah, they leave it on site.
And then, depending, we basically will give it away to anybody who will have it. Moving on to our well project, we had some important things happen. Basically, we're well more into the construction phase. Weeks drilling installed the pump at 31 Wharf this last month. We continue to prep the treatment site at Mesa Park for the resource recovery well, and we've continued to have meetings with BCLT and Habitat for Humanity to coordinate a design of the well project and the housing project. This is just to show you, right behind us, and you've probably seen this, but basically this is moving forward. We essentially prepared the blocks that the pea gravel sits in, and now the tanks are in place. I showed you last time a bunch of the electrical work, and this is basically just more shots of the fully finished pump at the 31 Wharf. One thing, Andrew, I don't know if you'd be willing to do this, but one thing that Jeff Clapp had mentioned was like, we have a big project there. They have obviously illustrations or whatever those are called, depictions of what the whole thing is gonna look like. And he was one renderings, yeah, and it was wondering if we could maybe create a rendering for what our thing would look like, because basically our thing is gonna go up probably before theirs will. And I don't know if you guys are supportive of that, but just thought it'd be worth mentioning, so like, because it's quite, the tank that's gonna go up there in the shed are big and maybe not the most beautiful things in the world. And to what extent do we wanna let the public know a priori, like, hey, this is our project?
Is there a design?
Yeah, there's designs for it, but it doesn't have like rendering and stuff, it's more like,
There's like elevations with dimensions and general
yes,
form.
yes, and it's getting more and more formed.
I
But,
could take a look at it.
okay, anyways, it's
And
just,
the tanks are plastic and
they look just like this, the green. Yeah, and so some of it is like, basically working with BCLT and making sure like the whole thing statutorily has to have fencing around it and stuff like that, and it's like, maybe we've already purchased fencing for the project. But basically, like, we can repurpose that fencing for other uses, and whether we put like a nicer fence there, given that it's like this big housing project and we don't want people to object to the project because they're objecting to our project.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I told BCLT, like, we're willing to pay more money to put in nicer fencing so that you guys are comfortable with our project, and the future homeowners are not like hating the fact that they have to look at our hideous infrastructure.
or
Yeah.
at least some kind of bougainvillea or something.
Yeah.
If you can send me the.
That's what our engineers do.
Send me the drawings, I'll go.
Okay, this is basically the tank site. The 5th operation update is our tank site. I wish I could say that it's done and give you a total project breakdown, but unfortunately, we are still waiting for the electrical to be finalized. Some miscellaneous updates, on June 2nd, Director Walker and I met with DPW engineers to discuss their project to repair the road at 95 Wharf. The current plan is as follows. The county is to undertake a temporary protective measure between September and October. There's no planned drilling for that project, and we're not gonna do any water or sewer shutdowns because, the work that's planned is not likely to damage any of our infrastructure. The county is to seek grant funds for more comprehensive project that will involve drilling. Again, that's a future project. What we will do in this next year is engage our, and our favorite engineer to look at fortifying and moving our water main inland and slip lining likely our sewer main. And so that is basically, we should do that anyway, but it's a prioritization, I'd say a capital improvement project that we're prioritizing because the county has basically, it's incentivizing the work to happen, incentivizing the county to actually do that work. Because part of what is making them anxious is that we have like old terracotta sewer main down there and, with the planned drilling that and a more extensive project that is required to underpin their repair of the road, they're very worried that that is gonna cause water or sewer leaks. So this is kind of us basically doing, things that need to be done anyway, but also basically doing them in preemption of them doing more extensive road repairs. They've been really cooperative is my feeling, and it's been, really nice to work with folks at DPW.
And it'll also give us an opportunity to inform the people on the street. who are
Yeah.
Impacted.
Yes, and I would say, obviously, this was like an over hour-long conversation. I'm distilling it down to what
Yeah.
the plan is. But there were all kinds of reasons, because effectively, this looks like it was the plan originally. Really, this is coming off of the heels of they were planning to do a drilling project. We were planning to do water and sewer shutdowns, but it was unclear for how long those were gonna be. And it was just getting very complicated. And so this is basically, a diversion of that plan that really looks at doing a more kind of, I'd call it like almost a Band-Aid repair right now with the idea that we move our stuff to promote a more extensive long-term project. Ultimately, I think my reading is that some of those long-term, like the extent of that long-term project is really gonna depend on county fund or the ability of the county to secure funds.
Yeah.
So we don't know what that's gonna look like, and that's really not, obviously we'll continue to communicate with them. I think one of the things that I really appreciate is that there's like a very cooperative approach to this. It's like, when we do our work, we will learn stuff. When they do some of their kind of potentially some of their exploratory work, they may learn things that inform our project. But basically, and to whatever extent, if we're really aligning some of the actual scheduling of some of these projects, to what extent can we delay our full pave so that we're not essentially doing extensive and expensive paving that ultimately just gets ripped up for their project.
And we were in a position where if they were to do the work this summer, or fall, then the people on the street, because the best thing would be for us to just shut our water sewer service, and then there's no concern about them bursting the pipe and having stuff. But people, in summer, people are renting their places out, or maybe, need that income. So I think if we're able to, I'm happy to go around with a flyer and or send a link to my neighbors and just let them know, like, you should plan for next year or whenever, and we'll keep you updated, but that you might wanna just. Well, but at this point, we're proposing that there would be service because we would have relocated, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, good
Yeah.
job. It took a lot of your time and effort, but I think you came out with.
Yeah, and
Better.
I really appreciate your joining me on those meetings and just you offering your expertise, giving me a lot more confidence in any decision making I was making.
What is the temporary measure they're doing?
Billing,
Put a sign up that says do not erode.
yeah, they got a lot of saging.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, no, I think it's Phil. I think the question is how, you know, given that it's a whole, how do you fill something that's like, it's not, it's
not
open on the other
contained.
side, yes, obviously contiguous with the lagoon on the other side, so. I think they have basically engineering tricks that allow them to kind of block off that one side and fill.
Yeah.
All right.
And, automated billing, this is very exciting.
Oh, yeah, we got our bill.
Yeah, a handful of eligible BCPUD staff and board members, 6 people in total, have signed up for e-billing and paid their water bill online. The payments have been received in BC Pud's bank account. The process has been straightforward and Annie is excited to launch the online payment option to the public. Annie wrote this. So, yes.
How many people have signed up?
6. So this was basically, just to remind you, this was like our pilot program. And this is, I asked her to take a screenshot of what it looks like, so this is what the portal looks like. I mean, what I said is, if you guys wanna give me feedback one way or the other, we could do that now. Effectively, Annie's super excited to launch this. She was prepared to do it July 1. And if you guys are comfortable with that, I would say direct us to do that. If it's something where you're like, no, we want this to come back at our July meeting and we would launch it September.
I signed up, I'm for it.
Okay.
He held my hand, like how to just navigate, cause
Yeah.
I had 2. So
Okay,
I had to go in and do it again,
okay,
right, and she was able to link the 2 together, help me link the 2.
yeah, so basically what I'm looking for here is not like a formal vote or anything, but if you guys can direct me, do you want this to come back to you in July before we fully launch it, or are you ready for us to launch?
Do it.
You can launch it.
Send it.
I like the bird. I
Right.
don't like the way it looks, but I like the birds and it works fine, so.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
whole program is so inexpensive in the grand scheme.
You can tell.
The look and feel is not great, but it's worked really
works.
well.
Yeah,
I feel like the same one DeCarlos uses actually.
yeah.
I feel like it's very BPUD.
Yeah.
It is the sister lizard, no. And then, just to let you know, some of you may have seen this, but this is the public notice that went out after the heels of our discussion last time, where you guys asked us to emphasize like no mailboxes in the right of way. So this is basically a message that, Annie and I crafted together. And which I think she posted on Nextdoor, correct me, Belle?
Yeah.
And then also sent out with like whatever round of bills were going out at that time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
And
right.
that's it.
Expenditures, okay. Item 17, there's nothing. 18, nothing. 19, resident permit parking plan. I know that we have been provided with a map of the areas and a memo that says that the permits have been issued. I don't know, is there anything more to report, Bill?
No, I mean, I just was sort of closing it out in terms of all the permits have now been issued and the signs have gone up. I believe that although they are enforceable now, the sheriff's office said that they would probably start enforcing in earnest in like July 1. And there's been a few people who were late to the party. But
they're giving you feedback or
just, how come I never knew about this and I want a permit,
Right.
so it's been a little bit of conversations. But they're basically, we've given them all out and seems to be going pretty well. And I think that Sherry had told me she wasn't here tonight, but that she is gonna come to the July meeting. The resident permit parking committee without Sherry, I think, would like to continue because they feel there are other issues down in that area that they wanna kind of address, but they're gonna come to the July meeting and present what they have to present.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You mean to finalize that committee?
Just to, I guess, ask to continue the committee, and Sherry has said she's not gonna do it anymore, but there's other members of the committee who wanna continue on, so they can bring that to the board and you guys
Alright.
can have a
See
discussion,
what they say.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I had 2 observations, I can share with them, but I'll share with you. One is the sticker, didn't put it on and you put it over our VIN number.
Oh,
We can't get it off.
I can give you another one. That's
Is that
the problem, yeah.
And then the second, what I learned is by having a space that is doesn't have a restriction, people from Brighton moved their cars and just parked it for a week.
Oh, that's a bummer. Well, they're not
So
supposed to be
those
more than
spaces
72
that-
hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so in that situation, are we supposed to call somebody? Not you?
Call the sheriff's office probably, but I can look into that too, yeah. I mean, definitely they're supposed to move it within 72 hours. I don't know if you can stop them from parking and if you
More
don't
than
have
such,
such restrictions.
less than, okay,
You get a ticket and
more than 7 weeks, okay, thanks, I hadn't thought that. Right.
That's,
kind of
yeah.
obvious.
There's a lot of parking actually that is available, so I don't know why they have to come and park.
anything more on that item? No?
No, not for me.
Item 20 and 21, there's nothing. 22, are we passing on that, right?
Yeah, I think we'll pass on that because it was embedded into the arborist report,
Right,
so we'll defer that to next time.
20,
Just to let you know, I have a meeting with George on Friday. It may be that we need to call a special meeting depending on what the timing is looking like, because as you guys know. Every time we defer something, that's deferring it for a month. And there's some urgency around the executive order and when we would need that arborist report to be fed into MWPA for them to pursue the project. So, but I'll let you know. I don't know that now, and so I'd say we're deferring to July. Unless there is.
nothing on 23 through 27 takes us to approval of minutes, item 28. Give the minutes of the regular meeting from May the 21st. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? And if not, I get a motion to approve them.
I wasn't here, so.
You move to approval?
I wasn't here.
I noticed in
Okay, I'm looking for the motion to approve. Go ahead.
I noticed an emoji in the minutes for the first time. I think that's a
Yeah.
new one.
That would be Annie, who's excited.
Yeah. That was fun to see. I just found a slight error on page 5. I think the appropriations. Sorry.
Pages are not numbered, are they?
Hmm.
That's something I would suggest
Okay.
for the
Yeah.
future.
What was that, Jeff?
The
Pages aren't numbered.
No.
Okay, so where are you looking for?
Sorry, let me just pull it up.
Just say what the item is.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to pull it up real quick too. And it's page 5. Hold on. Under the appropriations. What is that?
There are times next to each item and you can tell us that.
Yeah, sorry.
You could also. Figure out the page with them.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to. I don't know.
Okay, so Belle, you want to
Oh, I see it here.
ask Annie to
It's 350, 150.
put pages on the minutes?
Yeah.
Thanks. You're looking at 351,
It
50
says
at the
review
bottom.
25 notice, I don't know,
Yeah, that's what it was. I think it's
Yeah.
24, 25 maybe.
or 25, 20,
24, 25,
I think it's supposed to be 25, 26.
25, 26.
right, right.
Okay.
Okay, any other corrections or changes? No?
No, it'd be nice to have them numbered like 1 of 5, 2 of 5, something like that.
Okay.
I think that would be most.
Yeah,
Dot the.
You mean the page number or,
Just down at the bottom of each page.
I mean, maybe also just to. Highlight the item.
yeah, used to be up in the right corner, wherever it goes, so you know, 1 of 5, 2 of 5, like
I mean,
that.
it'd be great if it corresponded to the agenda.
No, that's what I'm saying is like the item number is nice.
That's a good idea too.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. All right, can I get a motion then to approve these minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The warrants? Anybody have questions about any of the warrants?
I noticed that the Trojan UV system was on there again, but I think, was that like the second part of that? Cause we talked about that last month also, 48K for
I
is
think
that, or is that for the other well?
we wrote a check and then they came back to us with some some sort of,
Yes, this was a very weird thing, but
Yeah.
basically they wrote us a, what do you call that?
an estimate.
Yeah,
like
a quote,
a
they
quote,
they
yeah.
prepared a quote for us, and so we wrote the check. And then, Andy, you saw that on last time, and they're like, oh, no, that's not the real system. We need to prepare, we need to approve the actual specs for your system. So basically, we sent them a check even, they did cash it. And then sent us back the check, and so then you're seeing it again on here.
But
Okay.
avoided it.
So it's
So
the
that-
first one was voided. Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Any other comments or questions?
No,
Get a motion to approve then the warrants,
so move.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Materials to be signed, I guess if there's resolutions, I'll do it.
yeah, there's some stuff that was in the.
Checks are being passed around.
Okay,
Yeah.
and there was a resolution, everybody's one that there.
And next meeting date,
July 16th.
that'll be June, wouldn't it?
No, I think a couple of those.
No, we're in June.
Oh, excuse me, I lost track of it.
Goes so fast.
We just did the May meeting.
4 hours and 11 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't believe you missed that one.
All right, so I went,
So maybe a special
I will have-
meeting, you think, when might that meet? You don't.
I don't
not
have
till
no
Friday.
idea, I
Okay.
would only do that if they are
16.
telling us we have
at the
to.
third Wednesday of July,
I think so, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, 16.
July 16th?
Yep.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Oh.
All right, that's it. I can-
Thank you, beautiful. Very